Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of ABHE, and we are honored to have as our guest this week, Meghan Griffin. Meghan serves as the provost at Southeastern University, a large Christian university in Lakeland, Florida. Meghan spent several years at SEU, innovating educational offerings in church contexts before assuming the overall academic leadership at the university. And I've invited Meghan in to have a conversation around effective academic leadership. Few realize the complexities CAOs face as they lead the academic enterprise. And truly, having actually sat in that seat myself for a number of years, there is never a dull moment.
So true.
So thank you for coming in and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into some questions as it relates to the CAO position. Before we do that, so our audience can get to know you a little bit, tell us about a defining moment that God used in your life to propel you forward.
There are so many, some personal, some professional, but what comes to mind for me professionally, especially related to SEU and to the chief academic officer role, was actually a question that someone asked me a few years back. And for listeners, I think this is an important thing to know, that the question you ask can be a defining moment for people. But at the time, I was doing what you talked about earlier. I was leading a specific division of the university, focusing on partnerships. And my boss at the time came up to me, and I guess they had been considering, some future-oriented questions for the institution. And he asked me, Meghan, what's your preferred academic future for SEU? And that question gave me permission to think way bigger than just about what I was doing. It was about the whole university. And so I mapped out time. I could get alone and think about that and pray and dream and think about. And when I got the time, the answer just kind of flowed. Here's who we are at SEU, and here's what we do at SEU. And to do that fully, this is what we need to do next. And this is what it should look like. And I am telling you that right now, today, I am living in the answer to that question. Because I was able to take what I was thinking about, the permission to dream, became a response I gave back to him, that he gave back to the leadership team and the president, that eventually went to the board, that eventually became sort of a plan for what we were going to do next. And I'm living in the answer to that question today. So a game-changing moment for me was when somebody said, what's your preferred academic future? But what I hope people hear is the questions we ask people really, really matter.
Boy, they sure do. They sure do. And it's interesting even how you shared that. It gave you permission.
Right.
You hadn't given yourself permission to do that,
No.
right?
I mean, I felt like this is my role.
Yeah.
So I should only be speaking to those things. None of that is any of my business. Other people will decide. But I mean, when I was given permission to think way more broadly, man, did I have a lot to say.
And what a blessing for you too, to now be, like you said, living in that reality, that you're actually shaping that, and it's in process, and you're literally building what that vision was.
I would ask every single person listening, if no one has asked you, I'm going to ask you, what is your preferred academic future for your institution? Whether it's your job to answer that question or not, because the stuff you have inside of you might be the solution your institution needs. So if nobody's asking you, we're asking you. You got to unlock some of that stuff sometimes.
Amen. Well said. So let's get into some of the detail of being an academic leader. And for those of you who don't know Southeastern University, it's a fairly large institution, around 10,000 students, correct?
Yep, that's right.
So you have a number of things going on in your life. There's a lot of detail work. I can only imagine at a school that size that is associated with academic leadership. And I'd say even our smaller institutions in the academic world, the academic engine, there are so many details.
Sure.
How do you live in that tension of the detail? It's the reality. You have to deal with it, while also not allowing the details to bog down creative entrepreneurial thinking.
That's such a good question. And no matter what size institution person is serving, I think every person in a CAO type role has to manage like the tension between four primary elements of the work. And I kind of group them into, first of all, no matter what, we're all aiming for academic excellence for our institutions always. We're all aiming for, completion of the things that are part of academic operations. Those are the things that are never done no matter how hard you try. It's every year you're always doing curriculum updates and always contract updates and all the things that are just never finished. They're the detail work. And then there's the leadership side where you're reminding people why they were called to education in the first place and getting them prepared for the future that you're working toward. And then fourth is innovation, growth, all the new frontier stuff. So no matter every person serving in a CAO role is going to be geared toward one or two of those more than the others. And every institution is going to have some sort of mix of those four tensions that you have to kind of stay balanced in. So to answer your question, how do you balance the details and the innovation? It's going to be different for every person because every institutional mandate is a little bit different. Every CAO is a little bit different, but you have to build a team around you that mediates for wherever you fall within those four kind of tensions and whatever your institutional imperatives are. So for me personally, you couldn't keep me off the frontier if you tried. Like that's the stuff that I would do even if it wasn't part of my job. So I build a team around me that helps with the operations. And we have, an associate provost who really does work on a lot of the academic management stuff. And I have to say, I've got a budget manager and a liaison for the schedule and a project manager and that. So, I mean, I've got a lot of people around who help with the detail stuff because that frees me up for the things that I'm more gifted for, which is the innovation, the new curve, the frontier, and someone else would have to figure out a different mix. They might love that stuff and then need somebody who's going to help round out one of those other domains of the work. So everyone will have to figure that out a little bit differently.
But you paint a great picture because there are so many variables that are involved with that. And it's not a static job, and it's not the same at every institution. Even within an institution's life cycle, if you're at an institution for a period of time, you may ebb and flow in and out of those four domains, those four tensions, based on whatever the institution needs are. And there's almost like a self-awareness that needs to happen for the chief academic officer to make sure that, when they're at the institution, that they can fit where they're gifted and what they're passionate about, recognizing the fact that things do change over time. And that self-awareness to say, man, what lit my fire 5 years ago is no longer the reality at the institution.
Right.
And perhaps that's some of God's prompting to say, well, there are other future options for you that you're able to maximize in the way I've gifted you to serve me.
Right. And you've also got to think about complementing the gifts of the president that's called to lead your institution. You will not be gifted exactly the same as that person. That's one way to find out, the season is changing because they might have a different, preference for the season. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a self-awareness to that and a timing to that and a team awareness around all of it, but also an adaptability. Those four tensions, we all have to be able to do all of them and to flex with the season.
Yeah. You can't avoid it, right?
Nope.
There are parts of your job that you do have to be detail oriented. You can build your team around that, but Meghan is going to have to sit down at some point and deal with those details.
And don't get me wrong, I love a spreadsheet. I will do those things. I mean, I love them. I just don't love them more than innovation and growth. Right. So like I couldn't give some of the frontier stuff away because it's just so passionate about it. But we have others around us who we can kind of share some of the domains with for sure. So yeah, it's all balance.
Yeah. One of the more critical jobs that you have as the chief academic officer is that you pretty much take lead on the faculty hiring process. Talk to us about how you approach this critical job that all CAOs have to hire faculty.
Well, first I would say I take it really seriously because there's a lot to say about it, but it's worth the time
Mm-hmm.
to find mission fit faculty who really do suit your institution.
Yeah.
I think we owe it to our students and to their parents and to all the people who are counting on us to be who we say we are, to mean what we say we mean, that you get what that people really do teach all the things that are distinctives in the classroom, and to have absolute missional alignment in the classroom. I think it's imperative.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you do that, when you spend the time on that, you save yourself also a world of trouble on the back end. So
Mm-hmm.
I take it very seriously. Faculty hiring is something that we spend a lot of time on. I'd rather spend 3 times as much time on the front end and then be absolutely sure someone's a mission fit. So I do it. I've shared with a lot of people. I do a final interview with everyone, and I tell them straight up, there are 4 weird things you need to know about us. And I say it like that to kind of help people relax. But what I'm really communicating is SEU's distinctives, the things that, might seem different to someone when they're coming into the institution, but I need them to understand they're not changing.
Mm-hmm.
So don't think that these are things that we're flexing on. So our 4 weird things that I want everyone to know as they're considering joining our faculty is SEU has a very strong position on human sexuality. So I want them to read our human sexuality statement. It flows out of our human dignity statement. And I need people to be crystal clear on the university's position on that.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about SU's position on women in ministry because, our denominational affiliation has a strong position on that. And for anyone to teach the women at our institution, they've got to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
SEU's position on the Holy Spirit and what you'll see here and what you'll experience here. And I don't want anyone to be unclear about who we are in that sense. And then the fact, our governance model and the fact that SEU is a network, we're a campus in Lakeland, but we operate in 34 different states. And that's different. It's different than most institutional models. And then, so those are the 4 weird things. And as long as people are good with all of those things, and if I give them, if any of that feels uncomfortable or if there's anything there that we need to discuss, let's do it. And sometimes people do have questions and we can talk through those. And then 5th is a question I've put in front of people, which is, now talk to me, I'll ask this a bunch of different ways, but talk to me about the relationship between the academy and the church. And what I'm listening for is a heart posture and, the way people think higher ed and the church should be engaged, because I just need everyone to know SEU is an institution that exists to serve the church.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much that comes out in the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm hearing a lot of critique, and there's room for some of these statements, but the way it's said tells me a lot about posture. So it tells me if someone can join an institution that exists to serve the church. And so those are the things I ask, and I listen for all kinds of things in those answers. And if we have any difference in those spaces, we clear them up or we go a different direction. And that saves a world of trouble on the back end. I think for any CAO, it's better to just take the time from the beginning.
I'm curious if those faculty members who probably, because by the time you're doing the interview, they've gone through a pretty significant process, right? They've had multiple interviews. Has the team around you picked up the fact that those are the questions that you're going to ask and prep the candidate ahead of time, or is it something?
Well, I mean, and it's on a podcast now, and I've presented at conferences, and I tell everyone it's not a secret.
Yeah.
But I think also what it does is, I don't get surprises in my office because people know that this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So at this point, don't bring me somebody who's not a mission fit, who has an issue with one of our serious distinctives that wants to somehow change. Like, it's not changing. So I mean, I think it helps because people know if someone's not a match on these things, they're not going to proceed through this next step. So let's just not, bring someone to a final step. So yeah, they know. And I actually think that helps. That doesn't mean that I'm going to trust it's been done. I'm still going to ask those questions.
Because you can learn so much about how they engage it, whether they truly are speaking from their heart. And I love the question that you ask about the church, because that's almost every one of our institutions. And quite frankly, every institution in the United States has some connection with the church at some point. And I often have said that mission drift rarely at an institution rarely happens in the C-suite or in the boardroom. Really, it happens one bad faculty hire at a
Yeah.
time
In the classroom. Yep,
in
for
the
sure.
classroom. And that's where you're the gatekeeper to that.
Right.
And to be able to say and be upfront, I think it's fair to all parties involved that,
Yeah.
look, this is who we are. We understand academic freedom. We understand the
Right.
context from which you came. We get all of that. But if you're going to be part of this community, you just need
Yeah.
to know these things. And if
Yep.
you're uncomfortable with it, God bless you. He's got a different plan for you, but it's not
Exactly.
here.
You got it. And I got to know that when I'm sitting down with Dr. Engel, our president, and I got to look him in the eye and say, I am 100% sure that the people we're bringing on this roster of new faculty this year are a total mission fit. I feel great about all of them. And if ever a question is raised about anybody, it might be around, a teaching method or around, something, a policy or something like that, but it's not going to be around those crucial issues. They're not going to be around those things. So yeah, definitely.
Which says that as a CAO, you need to know your institution's culture and
Absolutely.
the tension we face. And I've been in this seat before. It's July, 2 months before the start of the semester. You desperately need that full-time science professor or math professor. And this is the only candidate you have. And you get into that situation and you're talking about your four weird things and the fifth question. And the tyranny of what you need and what that position needs, you can't compromise on those things, even though the pressure is there.
And I'm glad you painted that picture, because I've been in that situation. Even with some of our deans. There was a time when we were really building a new academic leadership team, really from the ground up. And I knew what we needed because I knew what our culture called for. And I had this profile in mind of what our deans needed to be. And I'm looking at the candidate pool, and I've promised our board, we're going to have the best dean's team Christian higher ed has ever seen. And I've been praying about them, and I'm just not seeing it in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And time is running out. And just like you said in that example, I mean, this sounds dramatic, but it's true. I mean, literally on my knees in my office, Lord, you know what we need.
Mm-hmm.
You know us, and you know what we need, and you've got to draw them in. I've done my part. I've done everything I can to recruit them. I've put this out. We've told everyone, but you've got to draw them in now. I don't see them yet. I know you can do it. And then I'm telling you, they show up. They show up every time. So even a science professor, a math professor, God will deliver what you need. It's him that does it anyway. So definitely don't compromise in the last hour. He will deliver what you need when you need it. And there's all kinds of creative ways in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
Students can wait for that one class. If you don't have the right professor, it's not worth offering the course yet.
That's right.
So,
that's right. Because if you do bring the wrong person in, you lose twice. You lose by the liability that they provide as being a bad hire, but then you also lose the reality of what if you actually did have the right person in place? Where would you actually be? And so it's a critical piece. You've been around higher education now long enough. You've seen some of the ebbs and flows. Things come and go. Fads come and go. I remember in my, this is going to really date me, when the internet actually came and email and the websites, and it's like, how in the world are we going to, is this just a fad? And I remember people saying,
I'm with you. Floppy disks and all that.
Wow. Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah. That's going way back. That's going way back. One of the things that's come up is artificial intelligence, AI.
Right.
It's all the hot topic. Is it a fad? Is it here to stay? How are you navigating the whole subject of artificial intelligence at Southeastern?
So we're taking it head on. And it's been a learning process for students and for me and for our faculty. It's for everyone. So we last summer developed what we call our generative artificial intelligence assistance policy. It's on our website if anyone wants to check it out. It's linked in our catalog. But basically it says, in summary, students are welcome to use AI, but they have to disclose the use of AI. They have to cite the use of AI. We outline cases where AI is allowable and not allowable. So, for example, we want students understanding what AI is for, ChatGPT and other tools. We want them engaging with it enough to know what its limitations are. What is it good for and not good for? But we also want them to understand, cases where it's helpful, not helpful. There are, like some assignments where the use of ChatGPT might help you with the beginning of, a draft of something. And that's fine as long as you tell us what your prompt was, what it gave. You have to save the transcripts and submit those as well. We want to see the difference between what happened and what you're submitting. But there are a lot of cases where the use of AI would not be possible in a real world situation. It's not going to prepare you for exams. So all of that is disclosed too. So in classes, for example, if a student is in a class where the testing conditions of the class wouldn't allow for the use of AI, we don't allow it, in the course either. So for example, we have accounting students that have to sit for exams, nursing students that have to sit for exams. Obviously, we're not going to use AI in those situations because their real world conditions wouldn't allow for them either.
Right.
So it's all, what we found. We offered a course last semester in AI prompt engineering. And most of the students in that class, we thought that offering the course would be full of students who knew way more about AI than the people teaching the class. But actually students are very much beginning with, learning how to navigate AI. They're getting better with it. But what we're seeing in industry is people are expecting students to graduate knowing how to use AI. They want to hire, young grads who can kind of instruct in the workplace on how to use AI. So we want our students to have some experience with it. We're not afraid of AI. We just want everyone using it well. So is that perfect? No, we're still figuring out in every class, what's the best way to use AI? How can we help students figure out, uses of AI that are actually helpful to helping them think independently. Personally, one of the things I've liked to do is, okay, I'm going to ask ChatGPT a question, and then I will differentiate my thinking from this kind of basic answer. And it's a good start, but it makes you think differently than this information that's kind of spat out. And as long as people are following the policy and citing and being totally upfront and above board with what they're doing, which is what the policy requires, then we encourage the use of AI and experimentation with it, just like you would any new technology, the internet or calculators or anything else. What we're not going to do at SEU is try to completely keep students away from AI, because we want them to be able to be very good stewards of the tool.
Yeah. No, that's so well said. And there's something that you said in there, I think is a critical piece, is that how you're building policy around AI matches real world experiences. Right. So a student, like you use the example in a nursing setting, is not going to, in a nursing setting, is not going to use AI in that context, but there are certain contexts they will. So then make your policy parallel to what reality is.
Absolutely.
It is a powerful tool. I've found it's been powerful for ideation. Like if you're just trying to think about maybe something that you're writing about, and you just hit that block that you just can't quite get that initial thought out, and you prompt it, and then all of a sudden the flow just absolutely starts, and then you're able to build off of that. Powerful tool.
It is. Or even synthesis. So we had someone come in at the beginning of the year for our faculty. We call it faculty opening day, kind of remind people what are some of the goals and big ideas for the year. We had a recently retired faculty member come in and talk about, I wish I'd told students how much I loved them. If I could change one thing, I would have told students I loved them more. And he kind of shared a liturgy that he had done in just the past couple of years that he started doing in class. And of course, everyone in the room resonates with that idea, because we do love our students. So as a result, we finished this opening day activity, and I asked faculty, what are some ways that you love students? And they submitted all these things. And I asked ChatGPT to synthesize their list and ChatGPT did a way better job of synthesizing their list into neat categories than I would have ever done on my own. So even things like that. I mean, it's useful. It's as like kind of a finishing touch on dealing with a lot of information. And then I also showed faculty, here's your list, and then here's ChatGPT's summary of your list, which is one more meta moment for people. Look at us as leaders using ChatGPT. It's okay for students to do this too.
Yeah. One of when it first came out and it was all the buzz, and it's kind of settled down, but it's changing, it's shifting. One of the worst things a college can do is say, off limits. You can't touch it, and we're
Right.
gonna police it at that level. You've got to
Absolutely.
find ways to engage it.
Yeah. Students
Uh,
are like us. Tell us you can't, and you're really going to want to.
this is
Right.
kind of like parenting, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
So you are a woman
Hmm.
working in a field that is heavily dominated by male leadership. That is changing in the overall picture of higher education in the U.S. and North America, but I'd say still fairly male dominated. Any advice that you would share for our female listeners who are in or are aspiring to be in executive leadership positions?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think one of God's good gifts to us is he doesn't tell us ahead of time all the things we're going to be called into. So, for example, when I stepped into the provost role, I had no idea that one of the things that I would do would be speak in chapel on campus. Like, I would have never wanted to do that. But when the time came, I thought, you know what? Every single time I've been asked to step into something that felt too big for me or too scary for me or whatever, man, if God didn't right then and there, equip me and help me through it. So, all right, I'm being asked to do this. God's been faithful every single time before. Let's give it a whirl. The worst that could happen is they never ask me to do this again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, that wouldn't be so bad. So, I would say to women in leadership, you're not going to know everything that you're going to be asked or called to do.
Mm-hmm.
You will be called to do things that seem way outside your comfort zone
Mm-hmm.
that you never anticipated. And you should do them anyway, because at the moment that happens, it's because God has ordained that moment
Mm-hmm.
and he will be faithful to lead you through it. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing I would say is that in the role that I'm in now, I lead with men and I also lead a lot of men. And I have learned that, we're all conditioned to think that there's we have, and it's true that there's such difference between men and women. God's created us differently. But I know for sure men also deal sometimes with, can I do this? Am I the right person to do this? Confidence issues, or, the idea that women are more emotional in the workplace than men. Absolutely not true. Men have every emotion women have, anger and sadness and grief and all the things. So in a lot of ways, like, let's not psych ourselves out into thinking that there's things we can't do because we're women, and God will equip us for the things that we're called into. So I would just say, be bold, trust him,
Mm-hmm.
and he will lead us through. And that's kind of basic, but I think that's the main message for
Yeah.
women leaders.
Yeah, that's great. And you've done such a good job. And I love that message of just step into who you are, who God has
Mhm.
created you to be. And I'd say this is on the equation of both male and female. Our sin nature makes it about us.
Right.
And we're the center of the story and the narrative. And the reality is we're not.
Mhm.
We are simply being used by God. It's his story. And he creates, and it kind of gives you then that freedom to operate, to say, hey, this is what I bring to the table.
Right.
And I'm going to step into that, and I'm going to live into that, because ultimately this is God's work, and I'm simply being a steward of the way God has created
Right.
me to
And
be.
surprise, he knows you. He knows what you're good at. He knows
Yep.
what you're not good at.
Yep.
And anywhere you're weak, he just gets glorified more.
Yeah.
So we just have to lean into that and stop trying to be perfect in everything we do and just
Yeah.
let him lead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 minutes left. It's almost an unfair last question to have to do it in 2 minutes, but I believe in you. I think you can do it. So from your seat, you are a frontier person. You are thinking on the edge. What's next? As you look at biblical and Christian higher education from your seat at Southeastern University, what does it all look like 10 years from now?
Well, I think we're at a point where we really have to make a choice about that. I think there's a couple of different directions it could go. I grieve the fact that, we have a lot of Christian institutions that, I know that it's, we could talk about the demographic cliff and we could talk about all the challenges and budget. We could face all of those things as institutions individually. And then that could be a very challenging, difficult story. But I
Mm-hmm.
think there's an alternate path. I think that the future for Christian higher ed in the next 10 years could look more faithful and more flourishing than it has in the past, because we have an opportunity in these tough conditions to work together like we never have before. I think it's time for Christian higher education to be smarter than our state systems and even smarter than denominational systems in many ways, because we need to start thinking bigger. We are not each other's enemies. We need to work together to get people into education that is going to form their souls as well as their minds. That's the goal. And we can do that better together than we can separately. So for me, when I think about the next 10 years of Christian higher education, if we can all work toward that goal together, then what we'll see is more flourishing than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, so well said, and may God take those words and actually make it happen over the next 10 years. And it's just so
Amen.
exciting to think of what could be if we get beyond ourselves and our little kingdoms. So
yeah, and you're leading the way on that, so we
yeah.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Meghan, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your experiences. God has clearly gifted you for this season, and it's just so cool to see you flourishing in that Southeastern University context.
Thank you so much.
So until next time, stay kingdom focused.